So I'm Writing a Novel is the show where you join me, Oliver Brackenbury, on the journey of writing my next novel, from first ideas all the way to publication and promotion. In this one-man reality show, I'll share with you my ever-evolving thoughts and feelings on how I write, being a writer, and everything that entails at each stage of the process. I'll also interview special guests involved in writing and publishing. If you're the kind of person who likes to learn how things are made and get to know the people making them, then this is the show for you. I'd like to say a quick thank you to our Patreon supporters who make this show possible. Patrons get to listen to episodes of the show early and gain access to a treasure trove of bonus content that I'm regularly adding to, including over 70 bonus episodes, the TV pilot screenplay I wrote with the novel's character, and more. Please check it out at patreon.com/soimwritinganovel. Sometimes when I choose a guest for the podcast, it's simply a matter of me realizing, it's ridiculous I haven't had that person on the podcast yet. In this particular case, that person is Curtis Ellett, editor and publisher of Sword and Sorcery Magazine. I'm pretty sure it's the longest running still-extant Sword and Sorcery magazine, so for that alone, what an achievement. But yeah, you can find it at swordandsorcerymagazine.com, and it regularly has new stories every single month for you to enjoy for free. So, who is Curtis beyond what I've already told you? What are his thoughts and feelings about Sword and Sorcery and publishing and all that good stuff? Well, if only I'd interviewed him, eh? Why don't we go listen to that? And here I am with Curtis. Hi, Curtis.
Hi, Oliver. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for joining me tonight. As I was saying off mic, this feels weirdly overdue, so I'm glad we're finally getting to chat. I mean, why not just get into the questions, right? So, okay, let's start in the shallow end of the pool, the logical place to begin. What would you say is your origin story insofar as your relationship to Sword and Sorcery? Like, how did you trip over it? How did you fall in love? You know, how'd that whole thing go?
That goes so far back to when I first encountered a Sword and Sorcery story. I mean, for me, it's all been wrapped up in a very general love of fantasy literature of all kinds. And so I'm not someone who despises epic fantasy and stuff that I was had, but I don't think a lot of us are. But I do remember reading collections that had Robert E. Howard stories in them when I was a kid, and I was very into Thieves' World. I loved those and read a lot of them. And I also got into role-playing games at a very early age.
Do you remember what was like the first edition of D&D or what other system it was that you got into?
The very first encounter I had with Dungeons & Dragons was with the Blue Book Basic. That was in about 1979. And I've been playing ever since. Still play role-playing games of some kind or another about twice a week on average. So
good on you. I can manage about once every 2 weeks right now. I wish I could get more regular sessions in. And like, do you remember, was there any particular story that just like, maybe it was in Thieves' World, that like made you go like, okay, like there's some kind of flavor of fantasy that's a little different and I like it? Or as you say, was it kind of just part of a collage with everything else going on?
It was very much a part of a collage, but I could think, if I really think back to a story that grabbed me when I first read it when I was a kid, it was probably The Tower of the Elephant. Just that whole scene where Conan brains the jailer with the joint of meat, and then later, climbing the tower and all that. Just, I don't think when I first read the story that I really got the ending, but
I think that's okay though, right? Because I think we often encounter media that we don't fully understand. I mean, certainly I, growing up in the 80s and early 90s and stuff, like I ran into so much stuff before I was old enough, and not just like, I don't know, sex and violence, but also just complex themes and notions. But I think on some smaller, like, you kind of pick up something. Like, even if you don't know what it is, you're kind of like, there's a there.
Yep.
This elephant, this empathy that Conan is showing all of a sudden, like, this is something going on here. I gotta, and then you come back to it as an adult and you better appreciate it. But there's always that raw feeling of connection when you're younger.
So yeah, no, I do remember that story, and I remember over time I read a lot of stuff, but my reading has been very oddly gapped. So I've read a fair amount of Moorcock, but somehow managed to never be able to find the Elric stories at my library. So I read all Corum, all the Hawkmoon, a bunch of random other Moorcock novels, but never really managed to get my hands on any Elric. So, so far, the only Elric story I've read is the one that was published in Ness.
Oh, well, thank you.
I will rectify that eventually, but.
Well, hey, I'll have to link you to that discussion we had where we kind of compared the very first Elric story to that one and how his writing changed. It might be kind of interesting as someone who read that as their first Elric. I'm always curious about people's relationship to that one when it's their first. But we're not here to talk about my magazine. So, could you please let listeners know what is the origin story of Sword and Sorcery Magazine? Because it's been around for a hot minute, right? This is year 14 we're beginning?
I am in year 14, yeah. Back in 2012, I was thinking about writing. I had attempted to submit some stories to places and feeling somewhat disappointed in what was available. Not so much for Sword and Sorcery in particular, but for adventure fantasy of any kind. I was really not seeing it. A lot of the stuff that I was reading seemed to be very focused on technology. Some of it was very interesting. Some of it was not interesting at all. But I was missing stories set in, call it the mythic past, maybe, or maybe even the sort of almost realistic past that were fantasy. And so I decided that the market needed something for new writers, really, who were interested in writing that kind of stuff. And so I started my own online magazine, having no idea what I was getting into. But it's been a trip.
Well, where did Patrick Audrin come in? Because I was sort of doing a little bit of research in advance of this, and I was like, "Who's this Patrick Audrin guy?" I only knew about you.
I've been trying to expand a bit, and recently, actually, just in October, I think he started with me. I published one of his stories. If you go back, you'll find a Patrick Audrin story. And last August, September, sometime, he asked if I had a reader position available. But I haven't used readers. The advantage of not paying very well is that you don't get piles and piles of junk from people who just want to get paid. So I haven't had to worry about any kind of influx of like AI generated stories or stuff like that, because
right, or like somebody just throwing their Garfield fan fiction at you because whatever, they saw a button that says submit. Yeah.
It's a little harder to submit to me than that. So
well, you know what I mean. Like people just go for anything sometimes, and you're like, why are you sending me this story about erotic clowns? I published Sword and Sorcery.
Well, if it was set before 1800, I might read it, because I published Sword and Sorcery. I love publishing Sword and Sorcery, but it's not all I publish. Despite the name in the magazine, I published fantasy set before 1800.
Okay.
Anywhere from the Stone Age to the flintlocks and sailing ships. But
well, I was going to ask, actually, so while we're there, you do mention on your site, like, exactly kind of what you said. Like, yeah, Sorcery Magazine, but I'll look at other stuff. However, there are some guidelines.
Yep.
Is there anything other than the 1800 as a hard line?
That's pretty much a hard line.
I think you mentioned something about like no thank you to steampunk, or am I wrong?
No thank you to steampunk, because that generally is set with a Victorian level of technology.
Right.
The very earliest steam engines might creep in, but that was before trains, as before steamships.
Yeah.
They were using them to pump out mines and like very, very first factories. But yeah.
Okay, so pretty much all like whatever people are thinking of when they submit to you, just like make certain it doesn't take place anywhere that resembles post 1800. But also like if someone submitted to you like a Regency era romance.
Well, that would be post 1800.
Oh, you're right.
But if it didn't mention any technology and it had fantastic elements, I would consider it.
Pardon me. What did I mean there? God, my English education is. I feel like there's a professor who should be yelling at me. Not Regency, Romantic era. I don't know, 1700s. Like,
yeah, no, yeah, certainly.
So you would look like a romance story
if it had fantastic elements.
If it had fantastic elements, okay, so that's another.
It is fantasy. Fantasy is important. Yes.
Okay, just checking. Yeah. When someone says anything before 1800, I go, okay, well, what are the boundaries here?
I mean, I published a story which was mostly a flirtatious sword fight once.
Cool.
It was kind of amusing.
What are some of the most push the limits of your genre boundary stories that you remember publishing?
That I've published?
Sorry if you just remember the gist. I know you've published quite a few.
I have a lot. I don't know if things really push the limits of the genre so much that I publish, because my genre is so wide. Yeah. Really, I like to see some variety. I mean, I have published some stories that do fall, clearly in the late 18th century. And they're, on the edge of my time period, but you go the other direction, you go as early as you like. Stone Age, fine, I don't care. I don't really like stories about technology. If you try to turn, I'm going to replace all of, the oil crisis with, the magic crisis.
With mana, yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't interest me much.
Why do you think that is?
Partly because when I've received those, it felt very much like people were just trying to get around my guidelines.
Yeah, fair.
I guess I just don't like that much.
Do you find it has like it lacks a human element when it's just kind of like, well, here's a story about systems and the inventions?
There is that. I like to see actual human characters, or actual human characters. I have, over the years, evolved in what I like to see. I've been doing it for a long time. My tastes have changed in reaction to what I see to a certain extent, but also just because I'm not the same person I was 14 years ago.
Well, I mean, that brings me to something else I really want to sort of poke and prod at a little bit. Like, you've had longevity, man. Like, a lot of independent publishers at any level. It's not often they make it past 2, 3, 5 years. 10 years is quite remarkable, quite unusual. Most of the big names we talk about, like Clarkesworld's been around for a while, and Beasts of Skies, but the publishers who've lasted as long as you have at the independent level anyway, not numerous. What would you attribute this longevity to?
Pure stubbornness is one thing. Also the fact that, truthfully, it's a very lightweight footprint for me. It takes less time to get an issue of Sword and Sorcery Magazine out than you might think. I call myself an editor, but frankly, I don't do a ton of editing. I'm an acquisitions editor, really. The stories that I publish are pretty raw from how I get them. If they're not very clean, I don't publish them. Not that they're necessarily perfect, and I've occasionally say, I really love this, but it needs another pass. And I've published some stories that I've gotten back from people, and I said, please, feel free to resubmit this after you work on it some more. But I'm not up to doing line editing. If I was, I'd probably be doing that for a living, and I probably wouldn't have been publishing Swords and Sorcery for 14 years.
Right on. So keeping it kind of like not such an onerous task as, say, some bozo crowdfunding a traditionally printed magazine that takes like a year.
Yeah, it is a lot easier to get out the amount of effort it takes me to get a whole year of Swords and Sorcery Magazine out is probably less effort than you put into a crowd fund, and I'm looking at doing my own with a great deal of trepidation at the moment. But
Well, yeah, and I do want to talk to you about what that is going to be for, but we'll put that near the end, I think. But yeah, I think there's wisdom to it, though, right? I mean, I wouldn't be too humble about it because you saw like you did a bunch of things that are actually weirdly hard for a lot of people. You said you knew what you wanted, you knew how you wanted to do it, you've kept it steady. You haven't just been like, I got to mess with this thing, even though it's working fine. It seems from your, what your goals are and everything, right? Like I call that a real success. I think a lot of us, would want to tinker with it or would assume, especially as we in this lovely capitalist world we live in, everything's going to get bigger every year. It's got to get bigger, and then like maybe you grow too fast or you just grow too far and it all collapses in itself. Like, I think there's really something cool about what you're doing and how you found this thing that you like to do. You found how you like to do it, and you just keep it going, man. You've published more authors than most publishers in the indie realm at this point, and I think that's super cool, especially combined with your desire to give first-time authors or early career authors a chance.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten writers from across the spectrum, from the people sending me the very first story they have ever sent out to, for someone to look at, all the way to, people who have been at least nominated for awards.
And after doing this for 13 years, have you ever if there's anyone sort of noteworthy that sort of chucked a story at you right away while they were already notorious, I'd love to hear who they were. But have you also had the joy of maybe watching authors who were published with you early on go on to kind of blossom and like, oh, hey, that person's got like a not book deal now. They sent me a story 2 years ago. That's cool. Good for them. Like, have you ever like watched careers develop that, threaded in part into your publication?
I have. And now I'm forgetting the guy's name. I don't have the world's best memory, but I published a couple of stories from one gentleman who sent me his novella, and asked if I was interested in reading it, and I said, well, I'd be happy to read it, but it's 20 odd thousand words long. It's too long for Swords and Sorcery Magazine, but I'd be happy to read it. I've occasionally read things for people that they sent me that I wasn't going to publish, and it was great. And actually said, because I thought it was very well centered around his characters and well done. And I suggested actually that he submit it to Beneath Ceaseless Skies, because I thought it would be great for them. But instead he found a publisher that publishes novellas standalone in electronic format only, but he got it published, and I did a review. So
oh, that's awesome.
It's on there, but
no, actually, mentioning reviews makes me think of nonfiction in general. And you published that as well. Was that the case from the beginning, or was it something you added later?
It was always something that I was interested in doing, was publishing occasional nonfiction pieces. Yeah. These days, I won't publish more than one per issue, but other than that, I'll publish as many as I get. I don't get somebody that I have one in every issue yet, so.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed Bryn Hammond's review of Red Sonja, I believe you published.
Yeah. So did I.
Yeah.
It was fun.
I mean, I suppose you could argue I have a bias or something, but like I got to know Bryn through her writing first, so
I think the first place that our careers intercepted was I published a review that you wrote.
Oh, what, really?
Yeah. You wrote a review of The Red Man and Others.
Oh yeah, of course. Jesus,
because I don't write them. I was approached saying, that.
Oh wow, that's so funny.
If I would be interested in reviewing it, and my stock answer to that is, well, I don't write reviews, which is not necessarily true now, because I have done some expanding, and I do have an occasional blog on the site now. Then, so I might write a review myself, that I have, but at the time, I didn't do any of that kind of content for the site myself. I didn't have a staff reviewer because I don't have a staff. So I said, I'd be happy to publish a review if you can find someone to write it. And they went to you.
Oh my god! Yeah, I'm so sorry. That was like 4.5 years ago. So I just like used up every part of my brain, with the big endeavor in recent weeks. So, wow, I forgot about that entirely. Jesus. Well, there you go. Us having a proper conversation is even more overdue.
Yeah. So I published reviews. I think the first one I published was in the first or second year. I don't remember
so
exactly what issue it was in, but yeah, it's not. They haven't always been frequent, but I have published reviews and essays on the genre. And my only guideline there is I won't publish anything that. All right, if you offend me, I probably won't publish it. But
I think that's reasonable.
if it's in the genre or edit about the genre anyway, and it's not dismissive of fantasy or sword and sorcery as a whole. That's the one opinion. It's like, don't send me an opinion that's just dismissive of the stuff I publish.
Of course, yeah.
So I'm not interested in that.
Hey, will you publish this article where I tell you smell bad? Yeah, sure. Some people have an interesting take on that.
But nobody's ever sent me one, so.
Oh, okay, good. Well, I mean, it's the internet, right? Like, I mean, I'll believe, if you said yes. But do you feel... You sound pretty relaxed about it, and I think that's a good attitude. But do you feel that you have that like nonfiction about genre should do something X, Y, Z? That it should like instruct, that it should spark further conversation, that it should entertain. I don't know. What role do you see the nonfiction that you publish having?
Well, my goal was to spark some conversations. At least spark some thoughts. I've never gotten a lot of feedback on the stories, so I've never really seen much conversation around the pieces in terms of things that happen in the comments or anything like that. But people do read them, I'm sure.
They absolutely do, and this, I have discovered a non-zero amount of authors, from your magazine that I've ended up reaching out to for stories, and I have definitely seen like a decent amount of stories from SNS Magazine discussed online, either in my own space or others. So I don't know. I feel like there's virtually nobody who I know in the sword and sorcery scene who isn't at least aware of you, or at least, or submitted stories or original work. So like I think maybe you have a bigger footprint than you might realize.
Yeah, no, I think that there are a few hundred people out there who religiously read my stories, and a few others that dip in occasionally, and they do get. I mean, I have a pretty good sized following on Blue Sky.
Hey, that matters,
Yeah.
it actually really does. Right now, it's probably the most impactful social media platform as far as I can tell. I mean,
no, I agree.
Give or take a TikTok, but I'm still getting my head around like what that means for publishers, really. Which I know you.
I don't do TikTok. I don't do Instagram. They're not me. But Blue Sky fits perfectly. It's what Twitter once was long ago, except it seems to be friendlier and better than Twitter ever was.
Yeah, I really like it a lot myself, and it's funny because I do Instagram and to some degree now Facebook still, but I find the majority of artists that I discover are not on the more visual platforms. It's on Blue Sky, just because I'm there, and I follow artists, and next thing you follow a few artists, I'll be like, well, hey, check out this other artist, and next thing you know, you just kind of follow the daisy chain recommendations, and you're following a whole bunch of cool people. I've been joking lately that Goran Gligovic should get like a, art co-director credit or something with my magazine because of the amount of artists I found just by him sharing them. Like, he's got excellent taste. Who am I to ignore that? But yeah, no, it's true. You're on Blue Sky, which is like, it's fun to have you in the chat there. And occasionally pop up on Discord, I see, which is also fun. Yeah. And
that's one of the places I hang out.
Yeah, and having done this thing again, as long as you have, like, I mean, you've seen a few social media platforms come and go and all that stuff, or become more or less popular. But it sounds like you're not hugely engaged with it. It's not something you're overly concerned with. Would that be fair to say?
Social media, yeah.
Like as a publisher?
No, I have a Patreon now, and it's actually getting enough money to pay my monthly costs, but that doesn't mean it covers the cost of hosting yet. It takes its time. It's been growing, and I'm sure it'll continue to grow. But it's never been an economic proposition for me. I don't have advertising. The reason that I don't pay very well is because I always paid out of pocket, so that's what I could afford. That's what I paid. It's pretty basic on the website level. It's not real fancy. People seem to like the way it looks.
It's a clean and easy read, though. I got to tell you, I've been on some other like sort of lo-fi websites, and they're always like, "What about purple on green or whatever?" So, like, thank you for doing something readable.
I have a little background in web design. I've actually studied it academically, and there are some trends in web design that have been over the last few years that just drive me nuts. And one of those is, oh, it's too high contrast. It's going to hurt people's eyes. It's like, it hurts my eyes. It's too low contrast. I can't see.
Yeah, like, I like nighttime mode, so to speak, but I know it's not for everybody. Like, it should be an option, if kind of thing, as opposed to just like,
well, dark mode is fine when you usually do light on dark. That's not reduced contrast. It's just flipping.
Oh, pardon me. Yeah. That's true.
Usually flipping the background and the foreground color. It's when the background color starts to get a little gray and the letters get to be a little gray. I mean, if it's absolutely stark white, stark black, that can be a little bit eye strain inducing. But if you don't have to dial it down very much. And a lot of people thought, oh, we need to reduce the contrast a little bit. They have no idea what a little bit is. The amount that you need to dial it back to make it not cause eye strain is a tiny amount. It's a tiny amount. It's not. And it has, I've seen way too many websites where it's done the opposite effect. And it's like gray on gray. And it's like, that's not easy to read.
Well, fair enough. But I mean, hey, speaking about standing out or not, and the fact that like promotion's not a huge thing for you, you're not trying to conquer the universe with the magazine, you're trying to do your thing that you enjoy. But you did start the Patreon. I mean, obviously like money, that's why people start Patreons. But like, Patreon's been around for a while. Like, was there anything particular that changed your mind back in the fall? Like, hey, I think I'm going to do, Patreon, and therefore I have to get the word out about the thing, because otherwise people would know, this for you.
There was one person in particular who changed my mind. My wife of 30 years, who wanted me to bring in a little bit of money from it to cover. I mean, I don't think she thought it was going to cover my hobby either, but it encouraged me to bring in a little bit of money from it to cover some of the expenses. So.
Well, hey, right on. I mean, I've seen it, and I don't know if it's rude for me to quote the exact number, but like, it's something that helps, like it's around, like I find people get obsessed again with big numbers, but it's like, hey man, like another $100 a month or whatever makes a difference, right? Like, they can cover maybe some submissions, cover some hosting, or a little bit of it, like, and so outside of social media and that kind of promotion, have you ever, like, how are you for going to conventions or trying to meet other publishers or that kind of thing? Not your jam, or do you do it, or do you do it and then just quietly like, move through the crowd kind of thing, or how do you feel about all that?
I have tried to meet people. I'm not very outgoing, to be honest. I'm very much an introvert. So, especially in big crowded rooms, I'm not real great at meeting people. But I do go to I would say my local convention annually, and I have a great time. That's ReaderCon.
Oh, yeah,
here in Eastern Massachusetts, and a lot of great people are always there. Not all of them are anything like local, so it's not just the half dozen writers and their fans from Eastern Massachusetts. It is a nationally known con that brings people in from all over the United States and beyond. There are definitely some people who come from Canada. Yeah. There's a forget his name, but a Canadian writer from Montreal who writes in French and English, who is there regularly, and I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but he's been a regular at ReaderCon. I mean, it's not super far. It's a you can drive down from Montreal and a day.
I've been wanting to go. Like, it just hasn't panned out yet. But like, I hear great things about it, and like, I've got years yourself, and actually Nat Webb I do the magazine with is in the main area. Like, I'm sure he would hop over there, and we could all have a drink or something. Like, I hope to make that happen some point.
I haven't met Nat Webb at ReaderCon yet because I don't think he's been there, but I think it's on his radar too, from what I've seen on.
No, I mean, at some point it'll happen. But so ReaderCon and all that, and you do meet up with people in the network and all that kind of thing. And like I said, I became aware of you, through the old Whetstone server. So I feel like you either must have been there or people there knew about you, and that's obviously how it led to me running the review.
I was never on the Whetstone server personally, but I did publish a story in Whetstone. That's my one published story was in Whetstone. So I did manage to get out one Sword and Sorcery tale in Whetstone, and so far that's my one publishing success. But as far as a writer, I'm still hoping on others. My writing project for this year is to try to pump out a short story every month, a rough draft, not a finished, necessarily publishable story yet, but the germ of something.
That's anyway. Good. End of the year, you got 12 stories out of it,
And I've done 2 months, and I'm well on to March, so I think I should probably manage to get through.
Awesome. Any particular length or guidelines you've given yourself, or is it just like one story a month? That's enough.
Yeah, it's a short story. It's not going to be longer than a short story because I couldn't do that in a month. But other than that, I think I'm going to fall within my own guidelines for what I would publish if I published my own work, which is anywhere between 1,500 and, well, the upper bound is a little fuzzy, but 8,500 is what it says on the guidelines.
Yeah, that's what the website.
It also says, if you want me to look at something outside this to query. If somebody says, I got a 10,000 word story I'd like to look at, I always say send it along, to be honest.
Would somebody, if they came at you with another novella or whatever, would you consider doing the most classic Sword and Sorcery thing of serialized telling across multiple issues, or is that not your bag?
No, that's one thing I haven't wanted to do because I want to publish more writers. So I don't want to commit to multiple stories from one writer at a time, essentially. So I don't think I'm going to serialize, although there are a few things I might make exceptions for, depending on how long they get.
Such as, sorry, but people listening are like,
oh well, if I get a look at the next one of Neil's, it's the Eliza Sky stories. If I get the fourth Eliza Sky story in the sequence, I don't care how long it is, I might be willing to break that one up because I've got the other three and I want the complete set.
Well, damn, that's a strong endorsement. All right.
I really love them. I don't know, once posted on a Blue Sky post that I would consider collecting them and getting them out as a book at some point, and I would consider doing that if
maybe you don't want to overthink it, but like, what is it about those stories that you love so much?
I like the ethnographic content. The culture is very well drawn and interesting, and like the way they talk about their relations between the sexes and how they think about gender in terms of job, actually. So within that world, jobs are gendered, and so Eliza Sky is in a very interesting position in that she actually fulfills within her culture's purview 2 different roles for the mercenary company that her father has gathered. She keeps the books, which for that world was a woman's role, and she's an officer of the company. She leads men, she fights, and that for them is a male role. But she doesn't adopt a male persona. She generally,
it's not a Mulan thing. She just says like, I'm doing this.
Yeah, exactly. She doesn't entirely accept her society's expectations. makes her own role in the world, and I really appreciate that, actually.
Right on. And like, you've been doing this for a minute. What would you like to see more of in sword and sorcery writing going forward? What do you feel is lacking, or do you just like it and you want more?
Um, well, I like to see variety in sword and sorcery stories. Um, Sometimes I get tired of endless lone barbarian sword swingers. I I'm very big on duos. The Fafhrd and Grey Mouser archetype is, I don't know, for me that's peak sword and sorcery right there. There's a lot you can do with a pair of characters that you can't do with one. And I like to see some through run with a pair through different stories, so that they're always together in one way or another. And I've seen people do it with romantic relationships. I've seen people do it with relationships that are totally not. But in either case, I love it. I just love having the pair. That makes a
Fair
story
enough.
for me. That just
I'm always a big fan with duos of big guy, little guy. Doesn't have to be men, but I just say guy. I just
yeah.
something about that's very pleasing. I don't
Yeah,
know
I'm
why.
doing that with my own sword and sorcery characters. I've got a big guy, little guy pair.
Yeah.
That's not horribly original, but who cares?
Well, I mean, originality is not always the goal, right? It's,
No,
it's taking pleasure in what you're doing.
yeah, it
And
is.
though it's funny you mentioned the barbarian thing, and you're not wrong. There's plenty of that if you look for it. But it reminded me of something Howard Andrew Jones once said, bless him, which was he was surprised when he was last doing subs for Tales from the Magician's Skull. He was like, "I'm not getting any barbarians. I'm getting all these like city guys, all these rogues. Like, what's huh? you
Yeah,
know." So I wonder sometimes if we should almost encourage share sort of best and brightest out there in the writing community, but everybody wants to, of course. But it's like, hey, let's come back to that lone barbarian. What can we is there anything new? Is there anything new to do with that guy? I don't know. I'm not arguing with you. It just reminded me of
no,
something funny that were like, I think sometimes it's like understandably and for good reason there can be kind of pushback against the initial archetype of a genre, but then that gets like ignored or deconstructed or remixed so heavily, and then you're like, well, what about the platonic ideal that we kind of got tired of for a while? What if we came back to that? What can we do with a guy with a name like Brack or Thack or Whack or whatever?
yeah. I've published my share of barbarian stories.
Oh,
I've
I know,
enjoyed some great ones. Uh,
Is there anything you would like to see more of? Again, as someone who's been at it for a minute and you've seen magazines come and go, I'm sure, and seen publishing houses come and go. Is there anything you would like to see more of in Sword and Sorcery publishing, or just maybe the fandom at large, if that's too specific?
there's a point at which more good short story venues is always a good thing, um, and more places having open submissions, um, because open submissions are very important for aspiring writers.
Mm-hmm.
You can't you can't get that first story out if there's no place that has open submissions. Not that every place has to have open submissions. I understand the appeal of going out and finding your people, um, but I definitely, part of my niche is I don't. That's just, and I do wish there were some more places uh, with frequent open submissions. Partly because I guess partly this is a little bit selfish on my part. Uh, I'd like to publish stories, but one choice I made right from the beginning was I would never publish my own work in Sword and Sorcery Magazine. No, none of my own work there. Yeah, okay, now I publish blog posts, and that's all my work so far.
I know what
But
you mean,
that's
though.
different. Yeah.
Yeah, that's different.
But until recently, other than the small amount of editorial content that goes in the introductions to the stories, I didn't do anything of that regard. And I'd like to be able to get some stories published. So, I want some places where I can send them. And, for me, that was Whetstone, and they're not there right now. They were the other place that was basically taking Sword and Sorcery at the same point that I was at. So I'm looking forward for them to coming back, because I guess they're on hiatus, so they should come back eventually. I hope.
Maybe, yeah, or maybe somebody else will see the opportunity and go, okay, well, time for a new amateur magazine, perhaps. We'll see what happens. Or we can have many. Maybe we can have Westman come back and have a third party come and do it too. Heaven forbid, right? Like I think there's room. I feel like
there are some others out there.
Yeah, of course. But you know what I'm saying? Like I think there's a lot of room for this thing of ours, so to speak, to keep expanding, which is exciting. And to that, I'd like to ask you my last question for tonight, which is, I kind of know the answer, but I'm setting you up here. Your nonsense. What is coming up with Sword and Sorcery Magazine? What's new? What do you got planned? You mentioned a crowdfund earlier.
Yes, it did. Well, first of all, regular readers have probably noticed that I've been slowly expanding it a little bit. That's not getting to the crowdfund. That's just I've been getting so many good stories, and I have a little bit more money to play with because I have a Patreon. So I'm gonna buy a few more stories because I've got too many that I don't want to let go. So I'm publishing more of them. But the other thing that I am working on a little bit slowly at the moment, but I think things will pick up, is getting together a best of. And it's I've been at it too long to do one best of. So it's what I'm working on currently is best of volume 1.
Yeah.
And I'm going to cover the first 5 years. I've mostly got the stories picked out. I have to see if I can contact the writers. Good, many of them I'll have no trouble finding because I still know where they are to be found online anyway, because I have in some cases published their other stories by the same people within the last year or two. So that shouldn't be too hard. I've definitely had some regulars over the years.
So it sounds like we're going to have at least 3 volumes then, going by the 5 years at a pop, maybe, or the age of the magazine.
The first 2 will probably be 5-year volumes, and then after that, they will probably get shorter. Okay. Because as time has gone by, I've published more stories. So in the early days, I tended to publish 2 stories a month. And somewhere around 2018 or so.
How long have you been doing this? Like 1945, I decided. Go on, sorry.
Well, somewhere around 2018, I started publishing usually 3 stories a month. So I have more stories to pick from. So I'm going to do shorter years after the first 10.
Okay. Well, and what made you decide now was the time? Why not a year ago? Why not a year from now? What struck the spark?
It's been a long gestating project.
Okay.
It's something I had thought of doing. Well, geez, probably first thought of doing it about maybe 10 years ago. But I'm not sure I had the confidence to do what I'm doing with this, which is to say, here are my favorites, and I want to put them in print and, make a cool book of them. And an illustrated book, too, which is going to be cool. I'm looking.
Well, that'd be really cool. So listen, I know the crowdfund is still being planned. There's no link for me to share with people or anything.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing, I'm obviously going to share the web address. Blue Sky is also a good place to find you, it sounds like.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, so I can share that in the show notes, folks. Look for that. And yeah, I don't know, is there anywhere else people should keep an eye on you, whether it's for looking ahead to this project in particular, or just, what you're up to?
No, not really. My links are all on the website. So there's a Swords and Sorcery Magazine Facebook page. I think my X feed still exists, but I stopped posting there.
Yeah, that's no loss.
Yeah, no, it isn't.
That's
really
no loss.
I just haven't bothered to get rid of it, but I'm not too worried about them stealing the links.
Yeah, whatever, no worries there. So okay, cool. Well, I'll link to your website and Blue Sky there, and Facebook.
Website. Yeah, Patreon page, but that's all.
And Patreon, Jesus, of course, yes.
Yeah, those links are all on the website.
They're all on the website. So you know what? Folks, I'm just going to put the website, and I could even say it out loud: swordandsorcerymagazine.com. What a coup to get that URL.
it was a little bit easier 14 years ago, 13 years ago. 13 and a half when I actually got the URL, I guess, at this point. I had it for a few months before I got the first issue out.
I just think that's really cool. It's almost like getting, I don't know, car.com. Like, it's pretty, it's like a very rudimentary, like, name in the thing you're doing. And that's, like, such a win to get it. Like, it was so cool. Well, I hope if you ever don't want it, if you ever want, no.
No, I think I'm going to keep it. And honestly, I don't have a succession plan, but if it gets to the point where I'm not going to be able to do this anymore, as I'm, if I do it for another 20 years, I'll probably be really needing to find someone to take it over. I will hopefully at that point pass it on to someone who is willing to do what I've done with it. And hopefully by then they'll be paying the writers more than $10 a story, but
Hey, who knows, right? I mean, the anthology could help build the audience and, bring more people, bring more Patreon people,
Well, it will pay some of the writers a little bit more money. I mean, that's one of the reasons for doing it too. I'm not asking anyone to be in it without getting paid again. Very important.
Of course. All right, well, that's awesome, man. I really look forward to the anthology, especially as someone who, like, it doesn't matter what the contrast is. I have trouble reading fiction at a great length online. And by a great length, I mean more than like 500 words. Just something about me. I don't know. I have my eyes. I don't know, whatever. So I really look forward to being able to hold a good thick wedge of Sword and Sorcery Magazine in my hands. Curtis, like, this has been a pleasure, man. Like I said, so overdue. I'm really happy we finally got to have a chat, and I got to have you on the podcast. And I encourage everyone listening, go to swordandsorcerymagazine.com, check it out, dip in and around. There's a few stories there.
It's been an honor and a pleasure to be here. I've enjoyed this actually quite a bit.
Oh, I'm glad, man. All right, well, I'll see you around the Discord and so on, I guess. And all right, take care.
Well, good night.
So I'm Writing a Novel features original intro and outro music by Gloria Guns and is hosted by yours truly, Oliver Brackenbury. If you'd like to get in touch, please email us at soimwritinganovel@gmail.com. Please consider sharing the show with anybody who might like it, or checking out any of the other ways you can support the show by heading to soimwritinganovel.com/support the show, which has things like links to our Patreon, Coffee, and PayPal. Thanks for hanging out with me, and Curtis, and I'll see you soon.